ladies and gentlemen. My name is Piers Ridyard. I am the CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix. And today we have another Radix roundtable for everyone, where we have people from the RDX team who are here with me. I have Jeremy, our CMO. I have Adam, our Chief Strategy Officer. I have Matthew, our Chief CPO. And I have Russ, our CTO. And today we're going to be answering questions from the community that have been put forwards to us to discuss in a bit more of a relaxed and, collective way. And I've also got Jeremy next to me. It may be cut out, but I can actually do this. And this is going to really annoy Adam. So this is why I'm doing it. So the first question is, given the tribal nature of crypto, there are armies of people who will pick up on any mistakes a perceived competitor makes. This can make a PR nightmare and very damaging to adoption. Assuming the team agrees, to what extent does this frame your thinking from a PR and marketing perspective? Russell?
This is one that not this sentiment, but we see a lot in the socials. People like slagging other projects all the time. And it is very tribal, and it's something that I never like to see, because this is a space that has a lot of really, really hard problems. And anybody who is doing something novel and is trying to solve something has my respect, and they should have yours as well. And a lot of these people are really terrifyingly smart people. We think that they're not solving the right problem. We think that we're solving the right problem. And my hope is that one day they have the Radix revelation as well, and then they come to work here and they say, you know what, that's the correct problem to be spending my time on. And that's going to be a hard thing to do if we spent our time as a community throwing stones at them the whole time. And it's good to point out factual differences, saying that, here's a comparison of projects. All that kind of stuff is good. But I hate the ganging up on things, or the mockery when, another network has an outage or something like that. It's not productive, and it just gets people's back up against the wall, and then they stop listening to you. And you might have a good point to make that they're not going to be receptive to hear anymore, because you've established yourself as an enemy. So from the perspective of the team and the marketing department, it's good to point out where we think Radix is better. But we don't want to be adversarial about it in a mean way, sort of thing. We really do believe that there's a lot of smart people in this space, and we want them all working here eventually.
From a PR perspective for the industry as a whole,
I actually interpreted this question slightly differently, which is what happens when invariably we slip up in some way, because we're not perfect. I mean, you are, but the rest of us aren't.
It's my hair.
Yeah, it's your hair. What happens when that happens? It's like invariably something's going to happen. There's going to be one of the hard and fast rules is that you're going to have a PR issue at some point. And I think, just echoing what Russ said, is we have to stay true to our values and stay true to what we believe in, own any mistakes that we made, acknowledge it, and then talk about what are the things that we really care about. We care about bringing DeFi to a $400 trillion market. We care about building a world that doesn't suck. We care about giving builders all the tools they need to obsolete traditional finance. We're going to focus on staying positive. You don't win by going negative. It just doesn't happen. And then from an internal perspective, we just have to know those days are going to come. And if they do, it's actually a great sign for us, because if people are picking on us, it means they actually are scared about us. So we know that day is going to come, and we just have to be ready, because that day is, like I said, it's going to come. So we'll have a plan in place. We'll deal with it. And these things, they'll blow over quickly enough, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting, because I read that in a different way again. I was like, what happens when the industry has PR nightmares, and how does that damage adoption? So things like Celsius, things like Terra, how's that damaged? It's an interesting one. I think we've been through, from my perspective on that question, we've been through a number of cycles. The death of Bitcoin has been declared many times, whether it's gone through a boom and bust cycle from $5 to $500, then down back to $50, and then then had the next cycle and the next cycle. And I think that these industry blow-ups, things like Celsius, things like Terra, are really important learning points in the cycle. I do actually think that, from my experience of talking with some pretty serious people in the finance space. They're already sold on the technology. I think a lot of people are like, yes, public ledgers and decentralized ledger technology and blockchain is revolutionary. I don't think that's actually really a question anymore. People aren't going, this is going to go away, not the people who really seriously think about this space. And so what often happens is the PR cycle happens, but it is actually driving more visibility to the space. Not all of it's good attention, but some of those people are taking a look for the first time, and a subsection of those go, well, no, actually, that's not the whole industry. That's just a particular thing. Oh, no, that's actually not, and every time that happens, and then the next wave comes along, and those people have leaned in and they start to sort of like make companies and investments, and then you get your next wave of adoption. So I think they go hand in hand. And while short term it can feel damaging, long term, as long as expectations are managed and longer communication is done correctly, then the industry emerges stronger off the back of it and ends up learning and developing and building systems that are able to avoid those kind of disasters. And we've seen that time and time again. So like I think that it's just all part of the game.
As they say, no such thing as bad PR.
No such thing as bad news, right? Exactly. No such thing as bad coverage, right?
The other thing I'd add to that as well is that outside of just PR and marketing is that it's a relatively small space still. And like a lot of the potential partners, builders, projects that exist within the realm are multi-chain and will continue to be multi-chain for quite a while. And if you get a reputation within that small circle of bashing other people doing innovative experimental things, that's going to make those biz dev opportunities and those growth opportunities a lot harder. And from a community perspective as well, I don't think it's a healthy thing for the community. Like I literally got off a call earlier today with a partner who was talking about how much they've enjoyed getting to learn about crypto and in the community. I was like, oh, what have you found different about the Radix community compared to other crypto communities? And pretty much the exact quote from them was, it was amazing at how helpful and positive people were as soon as I joined from so many different angles. And that encourages people to stay in this community and follow the movement far more than trying to tear down
the tribalism only goes so far. It kind of tops out. And then if you want to go really mainstream, like that's not going to carry you.
Yeah, like I think that what's really interesting to see with the Bitcoin community post this cycle has been how much even like the most hardcore Bitcoiners who are considered to be some of the thought leaders are actually sort of backing away from full Bitcoin maximalism, because like there is it like one of the things that I noticed in conversations I had with friends of mine who are Bitcoin maximalists is like the fervor and the way in which they were like, this is the only way possible, just actually turned me off, made me detract. I like Bitcoin, I like Ethereum, I like the new layer ones as well, like Avalanche and Solana and Near and Cosmos, and I think they're all tremendously smart people making really interesting things. And as Russell says, a lot of them are we think are the wrong decisions, but that doesn't mean we don't respect the teams and don't think that they're doing amazing work towards a common goal, which is making this technology ubiquitous and making this technology adopted by everyone. Next question is, investment firms are moving more and more towards ESG criteria. Do we have plans to promote Radix as a low environmental impact network? A good example of this is what Avalanche has been doing. Avalanche has definitely been pushing the ESG agenda, especially with their efficient green high performance marketing. And we're seeing ESG, for those who don't know what ESG stands for, environmental, social, and governance, emerging more as a criterion which people invest in companies. Now, obviously, Radix is a proof of stake network, is immensely low emission versus things like Bitcoin and any other proof of work networks. In terms of other layer ones, it's also pretty efficient, like what we've done with the Radix engine in terms of making it more efficient for the execution of things like smart contracts and stuff like that, does mean again that you have a lot lower energy consumption per execution cycle on top of the Radix network. So those are all good things. The thing is that I tend to view ESG as one of these things that happens in much more mature industries and sectors. Like it often ends up being, once a sector has been created and and product market fit is understood, and you have a large amount of the market share already sort of being taken by the players, that you start to talk more about the environmental impact of what you're doing, especially if you're a manufacturing company or a commodities company or someone who's like pulling something out of the ground. For a technology company where we're not actually even running the network, and the network is being run by a decentralized network of node runners, shout out to the node runner community, and the amount of power that is being consumed for those functions right now is tiny for the ledger as it stands. Like the ESG agenda is not something that's like right at the front of consideration as we're building the Radix platform, because it just doesn't really fit into stuff that we're seeing as a priority for actually getting adoption and for actually driving sort of usage of the network. We're very content with the fact that we've done some amazing stride forwards in reducing the environmental impact the platform has in terms of its low power consumption versus other layer ones. But the thing is that ESG, like I strongly believe in humanity's requirement to reduce its impact on the environment, to treat the people that are stakeholders within society better, and to provide greater transparency in how you provide governance to people. But the thing is that it has to be done. I think it has to be done honestly. I think it has to be done with a genuine desire to actually provide real value in some way to the stakeholders that you're trying to improve the lives of or reduce the impact of. And right now, we're not actually in a situation where we can do that, because the scale isn't there, because the distribution isn't there, because the adoption isn't there, and because if we're honest about it, the impact is pretty small at the moment. But it is something we care about. Something I care about. I'm speaking for everyone else here, but something I care about. But it's not something that I think should be front and center of this, because, quite honestly, it's not really a differentiator versus Avalanche or Solana or Near or any of the sort of like the new generation of platforms. They're all approximately the same. Obviously, Radix is a bit more efficient, but it's not like people are going to be going, oh my god, it's 10x, right? It is versus Bitcoin, but so is everyone else. So like, why talk about it as a particular differentiator? My view. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we've covered this one.
Okay. All right, next question is by Captain Charles. When in the roadmap is the governance system expected to be functional? Will community government proposals and voting be on the menu before Xi'an comes out, or is it something we can expect farther down the road? I ain't asking for details on how the system works, but more about what to roughly expect in terms of time. I'm going to speak last on this because I've been speaking the whole time so far. So Matt, you first. Adam, talk a little bit about what you've been doing with Rob, and then I can talk a little bit about when I think these things are likely to come in.
Yeah, I'll speak just briefly on this. I mean, I don't want to speak around the question because I know the question is about time frame, so I'm not going to say much about that because it's difficult. Like before you can, it's kind of like a technical roadmap. Like you can't say anything about time frame until you can really clearly say what the problem is you're trying to solve. And that is a really difficult problem for governance. Like there's not sort of there was a while where I was participating in this IEEE group that was like, literally there was this working group that was spending an enormous amount of time just trying to define what blockchain governance is, like the terminology around it even. Like there's not a clear definition. Like, all right, here's the problem you want to solve. And there are all these different solutions that people are competing to try to find better ways of doing it. Like, in a lot of ways, a lot of the research that we're going into that I'm sure Adam will talk about is trying to get a very clear handle on like what's the most important aspect of governance that really matters and what time frame for the network in order to make the network successful and to make sure that things are accountable and heading in the right direction. So like this is going to be a long roadmap on this stuff because it's not as if we just kind of go like, it's not like Babylon where we can say like, all right, we need to deliver these things. We've done the research work. We know what we're building. Now we're on implementation phase and we know when we're going to deliver that. And we can put a date on it. Governance is like, this is a very open-ended R&D question, if you will, about what the problem to solve is. And then what is the appropriate way of approaching that problem with the community. I don't know, Adam, what do you think?
Well, the good news is that there is dedicated thinking resource as Piers said. So we have hired and had in post for a couple of weeks now a governance lead researching what do we even need to answer with governance on a layer one like Radix. And one of the big, really interesting things to me is, as Rob's been getting dug into this, is looking at, one, rolling this out needs to be done in a very intentful way, but also probably quite a cautious way, because the ability to get unforeseen ramifications for stakeholders who may not even exist in the network by decisions made before is probably not a good solution that you want. It's also something that's got to be rolled out with the thoughts of key stakeholders in that process. So one of the really key things here is that these will be proposals. It will be a series of probably proposals to the wider community, the stakeholders within the Radix network of, is this the sort of thing that you want? What are your thoughts on this? A feedback discussion, proposal, feedback discussion, proposal. Before that is actually proposed in a way that is adopted by the network as a whole. And the other thing is, governance can take, as Matt alluded to, so many different forms. And like, what is actually the scope of the problem that is being tried to solve by the tool? And that is something that even non-DLT scenarios account for. Like, there isn't, to my knowledge, a perfect way to govern a nation state, a company, organization, or anything else. There's different approaches, have pros and cons and different scopes. And there are some things that are opened up through DLT tech, like DAOs, for example, which are hugely innovative. And we're seeing massive benefits of those sort of structures, but also challenges that those structures present. And this is where rolling it out sequentially is going to be important. And I think it's something that will take time. And in the next kind of couple of months, I'm sure we'll be getting some more things put out by Rob, as he continues to research and discuss with key people and the wider community on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been really interesting in this cycle, in the DeFi cycle, has been the way in which there was like almost governance maximization occurred in the last DeFi cycle, where you ended up having these governance tokens that were given to everyone within DeFi applications, and then the community was then empowered to make decisions directly. You ended up getting all of these really interesting secondary effects. Like, if people had direct voting rights over a roadmap, then the roadmap became splintered and people would just keep changing their minds as to what the next most important thing was going to be. You saw dev burnout, you saw team burnout as a result of that. You saw people voting on things like spending decisions and stuff like that. And you ended up seeing huge amounts of internal fights that happened that basically got nowhere and just made a lot of people angry. You saw a lot of people disengaging from the governance process and essentially selling on their votes. And this actually is one of the things that is really interesting about Curve, and some of the things that happen with Curve's incentive pools, and where those incentives have gone, have been a voting structure that has actually now got bribing as a smart contract built into it. So there's lots of experiments that are going on. There's some really interesting thought leadership that's come out from Vitalik Buterin, which I highly recommend everyone reads, around like the fact that a plutocracy is a really bad way of creating governance. So like voting based on token holder, like the amount of money that you own, is a really bad governance mechanism. And he's now done like 4 or 5 articles on this, which I think are a lot of it is very insightful about what is good or bad. If you look at the layer 1 protocols as they are, the big ones like Solana or Avalanche or Ethereum, very few of them actually have any kind of governance voting at all. Most of them work on what essentially looks like an autocracy, with a view to actually become a fully decentralized system in time. I think that there is going to have to be a line that we decide that we're going down at some point, but it's not a good decision for us to, and like, as I've spoken about this before, it's a terrible time to start thinking about it now from the point of view of what do we want to implement, when we haven't even got Babylon out the door, when we haven't even seen what the ecosystem that builds on top of Radix is going to be, and ultimately how we would actually identify who the key stakeholders who need to have a voice in governance in the first place are. Because what governance has to do is it has to best represent the wishes of the people for whom they rely on the infrastructure. Like, if you are creating a commons for everyone, then you have to have a way in which that commons is able to reflect the views in an effective way that doesn't lead to stagnation or the lack of ability to make a decision. And right now, the main advantage Radix has is its ability to move quickly and to execute on a roadmap of stuff that we know have to be delivered. So this is a long way of saying the same thing that Matt and Adam is saying, which is like, we know it's a big problem. It has to have a lot of thought done to it. We have hired someone specifically to spend time researching and start writing about this particular problem set. But we have a roadmap to deliver, and there's very little that really needs to be adjusted whilst we deliver that roadmap, because we just have to execute. That's the thing that's most important here, speed of execution, because time to market is the number one thing that matters. Like, if we spend time working out governance systems and decision-making processes when we haven't even won the ability for the market to go, yes, this is where we want to build, I think that it's going to end up in a lot of discussion and debate about stuff, and a lot of energy expenditure on stuff that would be better spent elsewhere in terms of getting adoption and getting progress on delivery of product. So it is something we care about. It is something we're doing research on. It is something that we will be writing more on the subject of. But in terms of timelines for when this actually is going to come out, we're not sure. Definitely after Babylon is the absolute no. Next question is by dapper-dachshunds. Dachshunds. How do you say that? Dachshunds.
Dachshunds.
Dog.
Sausage dog.
Sausage dogs. Yeah, sausage dogs.
Dapper-dachshunds.
Yeah.
It's not how I would have spelled
Jackson?
That's a good name.
Yeah,
Very good name.
I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, dachshunds. Yeah, that's what it is.
With all kinds of DeFi projects collapsing now due to market circumstances and plain stupidity, it looks like DeFi is getting a bit of a bad reputation. What are you talking about? Does the team still consider branding Radix as a DeFi solution is the best option? The network can be used for much more, and the word DeFi might have negative associations now. I'm going to start that with Russell, because he hasn't said much yet. What do you think, Russell?
Close up the shop, boys. We're changing everything, I think, at this point. I mean, I'm not really worried about temporary perception of a term by people who haven't really engaged with the problem myself. This isn't my remit. I know that we're definitely focused on DeFi from the technical side. We'll continue to do so. We all see it as inevitable that DeFi is only going to grow, and this, to me, is just a temporary perception problem.
And for the people that you work with that are building the technology and building DeFi applications using the technology you guys are building, are you seeing people going, oh, we were clearly wrong about DeFi, we should just give up now?
No, obviously not. I mean, if you look at the results of our recent lending competition, in fact, the qualities of the interesting stuff people are doing financially related is only going up, and the bar was already really high from the first competition of what we saw. There is no shortage of people who believe this is the future and are quite eager to build a business around it on Radix.
I think Russ's head's about to explode.
Does it look that way? I think this one is more
of course we're going to stay with DeFi. Like, I don't have time for this. Look, I mean, the word branding was in there, so I feel I probably should, make a comment and appear like I have an idea what I'm talking about, right? Definitely. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that we should double down right now on the concept of DeFi. I mean, the market is down. Now is the time to really potentially go out and start establishing ourselves as the layer one specifically for DeFi. There's the narratives evolving among those people who are sort of, shall we say, Web3 convinced or Web3 believers that the multi-chain world will have layer ones that are purpose built. There's layer one for NFTs, layer one for gaming, layer one for metaverse, and there will be a layer one for DeFi. Now we happen to know that it's all DeFi, and eventually everyone else will figure that out. But for now, as from a marketing and branding perspective, owning that position in the market, especially when everyone else is taking a beating, while simultaneously, those who know, to Russell's point, those who've already studied it, is like there's total belief, and it's obvious that DeFi is going to win. So why not take advantage of what's going on right now and really just sort of say, yeah, we're the layer one for DeFi, because DeFi is going to happen. And if not, well, we got a bigger problem.
Yeah, I think they're
well, if you look back to the, I was just going to say, like, if you look back to when the .com bubble burst, a number of people, the internet's just a fad. Like, people always like bashing new technology. And if you look at news and stuff like that, I mean, crypto got bashed after the ICO kind of boom in 2017. Oh, it was just a fad, it's burst. Every time Bitcoin goes down, it's the end of the world. Every time Bitcoin goes up, it's the future of all of humanity. And that's what the mainstream press and press as a whole does. It's to get clicks on the internet. And I don't think that's a good barometer of long-term belief or opinion in technology, especially. And
if we change our branding based on sort of like where the wind is blowing on that particular day, then we're not going to have a brand worth anything.
Right. And like,
yeah,
go on there, Matt. Sorry.
I think there's the reality of the situation, and then there's how we brand it. And I mean, from an underlying product roadmap point of view, to us, there's no question that the problem we are trying to solve is the right problem to be solved. And what we call that, like DeFi, I think is a good way of referring to it. I think what we've been learning, from my point of view, and like I'm not a marketing guy, but like what I've seen over the last 6 months or something like that, is it feels like there's kind of an evolution of some of the terminology that's happening. Now, again, there are definitely some people that are like, DeFi was just was this short-term thing. And this is what Adam was talking about. That's nonsense. Like, there's no question, if you talk to people that are serious about the space, that this is what the direction that things are going. But from a purely, like, what do we call this? It reminds me of like going back to like, if you were in like 1999 or something like this, people were like, oh, are we going to call this thing cyberspace, or are we going to call it the information superhighway, or what? Like, the point was that the people that were in the know knew that there was something important here. They kind of didn't care what we called it. It was just a matter of like, what we're working on this problem because this is the right problem. Like, this is going to be huge. It's going to change how things work. And so I think what we've seen is that there's sort of an evolution of the terminology. Like, to me, DeFi, Web3, and even to a certain extent, Metaverse is all grasping towards the same belief in a transformative thing that's going on. And that thing is all about decentralized ownership. It's about bottoms-up systems versus top-down systems. It's about linking how we connect to different companies and services with a more self-sovereign notion of identity and ownership. Like, there are all these swirling concepts, and all those things are what we're building the Radix for. It's like, so in the question they mentioned, it's sort of like, they said that they think, Radix is how did they put it? Like, can be used for much more than DeFi. It's like, well, it's a matter of opinion. It's like, is DeFi all that stuff, or is DeFi, do we use that term just to refer to like sort of traditional financial stuff? Whatever it is, Radix is definitely being built for the bigger picture of where the world is going. And I think how the terminology evolves around that, like, I don't think it really matters. I mean, to us, it's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah. I think that's go on, Russ.
Really short. Like, anybody who thinks that there's not a place for a way to securely move assets between different parties on a public standard, which everything can agree to and is obvious to all, like, you're out of your mind if you don't think that's a game-changing thing, and no amount of bad press is going to change that.
This is like long arc of history kind of stuff. It's just, there's no question this is the direction it has to go.
We like the way that we make strategy at RDX works is around high conviction decision making that is made on the basis of like long-term thinking. And like, all of this is us going and looking at macro trends and technology application and product market fit and going, it is clear that finance on top of public ledgers is going to be a huge application area. If we call that finance built on public ledger decentralized finance, which is basically my definition of it, I don't really care how what the finance application is, or how narrow or widely it's cast, or whether or not it's an entirely regulated walled garden or is a completely open permissionless system. It's all built on top of public ledgers. It gets all of that magic Russell was talking about in terms of the interoperability of assets, interoperability of users, and the ability to create an incredibly efficient way of allocating capital globally. All of those things are going to happen. Public ledgers are going to win full stop on that race, because capital allocation is so much better using these systems, using programmable money and programmable applications, programmable assets, all that kind of stuff. And it only works when you can stitch it all together on top of a public ledger. So yeah, like I'm with Jeremy. You double down on narrative that you have high conviction on, because that's when the rest of the market that has doubt backs off. And there are plenty of high conviction application builders, there are plenty of high conviction asset managers, there's plenty of high conviction capital that still is going the same way as we are, the same way as we believe, is going, this is the future, we're investing long term in this. And if the rest of the market doesn't think so, they're going to be looking for who else is high conviction that they can build with. That's when you get your high conviction builders and your best applications. That's why people say the best bear market is for building, because it really does separate out who believes and who just sort of like flows with the wind. So like this is a long-term trend towards $400 trillion moving onto a global financial system. And like, that's gonna take time, and there's gonna be some blow-ups, and there's gonna be some bad press along the way. But if you've got high conviction, that is the path that we are treading. Next question. Is RDX Works working with governments or regulators at all? Is there a lobby budget? Do we have a lobby budget?
That's what I'm aware of.
He works in Washington, D.C.
I live in Washington, D.C. area. I guess I am the lobbying.
You are the lobbying.
Every now and then I talk to people, so yeah, no, not a.
We just get him to go, wearing Zcash stuff, and like try and convince people that privacy is a right. Privacy is a right.
Yeah, that's right.
No, we don't have a lobby budget. Matt, you've had some experience of working with governments. I'll talk a little bit about regulators, but talk a little bit about working with governments in this space.
Your answer is the one I was interested in hearing, because we definitely are working with regulators in some places in pretty interesting ways. But I'll let you run with that. I mean, governments are very difficult and very slow moving. Like if you're looking for permission for what you're doing by working with a government, you're going to be disappointed. Like you have to expect that they are going to adapt after the fact to the reality of what's transpired and realize, oh, okay, this is actually in the best interest of people or whatever it is. And so we kind of refigure things to try to catch up. So, I mean, I think you have to focus on the problems you're trying to solve, actually. And we're definitely the compliance aspect of these things is going to intersect with what's going on in the space way, way earlier than it will with broader governments. And so this is where I think we're focusing some of those efforts. I mean, it'll definitely get to that point, but it's like, I don't think you're going to have to, I know there are lobbying efforts that go on in the crypto space right now. And I think some of that stuff is interesting, but it's like, it's got to be like the industry getting together and focusing on like, look, governments, don't do this because this particular thing is going to bend the whole industry in the wrong direction, or it's going to, you're going to be giving up a competitive advantage as a nation because other people are going to see this in the correct way that you're not seeing it. So I definitely commend those efforts that are going on. I don't think it's something that Radix is going to do on its own by any means. Like there's the Coin Center thing that we went to where they were talking.
Yeah,
about
I personally know the Coin Center folk. I know the Blockchain Association folk. I know the Blockchain Digital Chamber of Commerce people. So like, I personally know them. I know the kind of stuff they do. It's very much in line with the things that we care about, which is everything that Matt said about adopting this technology to create a platform for new business model creation and innovation, that it's a competitive advantage. And ultimately, this serves the interests of end users and consumers anyway. So we're very much aligned with what they're doing, and they're doing great work, and we appreciate that. But, I don't think we need to spend our time and effort specifically doing that. We probably bang our heads.
The only thing I would say on that, though, is that we do keep an eye out for things where there is request for comments. So someone shared something that we were aware of in like the UK government was asking for people in the industry to specifically comment on DeFi and things related to DeFi. And obviously, when we see those and it's applicable, we don't purposely avoid those opportunities.
Yeah, so like we were asked on comments on the stablecoin request for comment that came in from the UK government. We've been asked on like tax issues. We've been asked on a bunch of stuff. I also have like randomly been asked at various points, like completely coincidentally, literally a couple of hours ago, I just got off a call from a large Asian government that's what their central bank digital currency research division plus their blockchain application research division for their entire government sector, where they're looking at insurance applications, they're looking at supply chain financing applications. And like after this was my second conversation with him, he was like, oh, we'd really know, we're going to give you, we'd love you to, we're going to do some RFPs. We'd love you guys to apply for an RFP. We'd love to work with you. We'd love you to build stuff for us. And the thing is that from the experience I've had so far, and I've seen Matt have, and I've seen others have in the space, the speed at which governments work and the level of procurement that you have to go through, even to be able for the technology to be approved at the base level, yes, we can use this piece of technology. Crypto and blockchain is just not mature enough. Even things like Corda, which has been specifically built for private implementations at banks, has problems getting through their procurement process. And so getting a government to understand why they should be building on top of a layer one protocol. And this is something that I've specifically said on many engagements where I'm like, look, the way that you get the value out of this is by deploying on layer one protocols, but you have to accept these things. You have to accept that the transactions are going to be visible. You have to accept that you do not control all visibility of everything on the platform. You have to accept that if you want to access liquid markets, that's the only way of getting there. And then a bunch of other stuff underneath that. And then the way in which they're going to interact with their ecosystem of banks that have got very large vested interests in them being part of the critical part of, issuance of currency, for example. The speed that's going to move at, it's just not relevant to our business model. It's not relevant to the adoption of this technology. Governments were the last to actually adopt, outside of the military, the last to actually adopt the internet for the use in digital government, right? They were the very, very late adopters. In fact, they were laggards in some departments where they were just drag kicking and streaming away from paper. And so you're going to see the same thing here. And I think that a lot of money, and I've seen a lot of startups fail from trying to engage in this process and just run out of money because they work on timeframes that are, months, and governments work on timeframes that are years to decades. And it's just a completely different pace. Yeah.
I think there's another thing interesting about regulation, because I think there's a lot of people are concerned about regulation showing up in here. And I think one thing that I've, some of the feedback I've gotten from people, I've been to SEC talks and I've talked to people that have kind of engaged with the space. And one of the things that this theme that occurs to me is that you actually have a lot of people in these regulating bodies that are trying to do the right thing. They have a mission, they're trying to protect individual people and everything. And they don't always succeed at this. A lot of times there's, these things are vastly inefficient the way they go about things. A lot of times people get caught up in things that they shouldn't have. It's not perfect by any means, but you still in the end have these organizations that are trying to accomplish something that has a reason for an existence. And so there is, I sometimes feel that the crypto space gets a little bit too hung up by basically going all right, what's sort of the letter of the law that's going to allow us to get past this, and then we can just ignore regulators. Okay, that's solved, and we can just forget about it, and we can go off and do our own thing. What's going to happen is once my opinion anyways, when regulators start showing up and when DeFi grows to the point where this becomes sort of top of mind for them and they start trying to regulate things more, I think there's going to be this process of them discovering what is going on in the space and where is the actual harm occurring, if it's occurring. And then are there new ways of going about it? They're always going to start from a place of regulating the way they have regulated in the past. But a lot of times those methods aren't going to apply the way we do things in DeFi. And so I think for a forward-looking crypto company, and this is the approach that we take, is that be thinking about what is the problem they're trying to solve, and the real problem, not sort of necessarily the way they're going about it, but sort of how do you protect individual consumers, or how do you avoid fraud? These are good things. And I think there are really more surgical, relevant ways of doing that on public ledgers, whether it's at a platform level or whether it's enabling application developers to build these things themselves into their applications. I think if we stay focused on ensuring that those things actually work better than they would have in the traditional world, then I think when regulators start showing up and paying attention to this, they go, oh, okay, you guys are trying to do the right thing here. And it changes the nature of the conversation, which isn't to say that isn't going to be still controversial and isn't going to be crazy when this stuff starts happening. But our approach has always been taking this long view of how do we provide the right tools? How do we enable developers to not be exposed to things by allowing them to do the right thing. Like I'm a big fan of like giving people a tool to do the right thing rather than trying to like put up artificial barriers and kind of go like, well, pretend this problem doesn't exist. And I don't know. I think this influences how we deal with regulators and how we deal with our product roadmap and everything else.
Yeah, I think there's also like, so go on, Russell, sorry.
I was going to say, in conversations we've had with people who are interested in regulation with vendors and the like, or that are in the space, 100% of the time we hear, you guys are so far out ahead. You guys are so far out ahead on this one. You've thought about this stuff well. Half the time we end up educating the party who's supposed to be the expert on this. And we have these conversations. They like, oh, that's an interesting way to think about it. And this is all already approved under Jersey regulation. Yep. So we're getting good feedback that we're thinking the right way from the people who are in the space. That's been my experience so far.
Yeah, I think there's another fact, like there's a wider factor, and the governments and regulations is an interesting one in that regulators are trying to protect consumers, but governments are trying to stimulate the economy. And one of the biggest things that is good that the industry can do right now that will make this pathway so much easier is build real applications that deliver real economic value, because that wins everything. Because at the end of the day, governments care about that. And if they are going and governments are competitive to each other, think about governments like countries. They are competitive for talent, for labor, for capital, right?
Especially these days.
Especially with where, a smaller population is able to deliver a larger percentage of the value in an economy. So what will happen is if some regulators are more aggressive and think about the regulation from the point of view of how to make it as a business enablement tool while still preventing harm, and the industry moves there, and the money moves there, and the capital moves there, you can bet your bottom dollar that the pendulum will move the other way, because of governments going, we are losing competitiveness, we are losing business. And so regardless of thinking about lobbying and all that kind of stuff, the most effective thing we can do as a layer one protocol is to help create businesses, help facilitate, give the tools to be able to help people make incredible businesses off the back of it. And then the stuff will follow. And I know that it can be really difficult to work in that uncertainty. And that's a big part of crypto. You're constantly working in this area of uncertainty. I'm not sure whether what I'm doing is strictly legal or just within the gray area, or if I push too far or whatever. But that is where the alpha is. That's where the people who are willing to take the risk and build into that green space and prove out in a way where they are actually trying to deliver value, not trying to scam people or shill people, but deliver value. That is the way the industry wins long term. Next question is there a potential place for protocol level privacy in the Radix roadmap? Or is it the opinion of the team that it needs to be implemented on the application level? I know we first need to bring live the solution that can usher in the mainstream phase for DeFi. If so, is it possible to build privacy in privacy solutions as an afterthought, speaking specifically at protocol level here? Matt?
Yeah, I'm tempted to basically give my same answer I did for governance, just replacing governance for privacy. Like, privacy is not a monolithic thing. There isn't sort of like, all right, we have to get the privacy feature, and when are we going to implement, and then when does it happen? Privacy is this very multifaceted, complex thing of what do you mean by that? Privacy to whom? Is it selective by individual? Are we talking about sort of guaranteed privacy? Like, there are all these multiple aspects of what we're trying to do here of like, am I trying to protect myself from visibility? Like, I don't want other people to see what assets I own, or is it more about I need to be able to have the freedom to do what I want to do without being constrained? Like, we have a lot of people in the crypto space that are trying to solve different aspects of this problem in different ways. And so it's very easy to kind of lump it into one thing of like, hey, we need a privacy feature. It's not in the near term roadmap. I mean, the other thing I'll say, just from a purely technology point of view, is all of these things, if you're talking about privacy, has a cost. Like, if you every time you do this, it's guaranteed that a solution that includes concealing of transactions or anonymization or like whatever it is is going to have a technological cost, not just in terms of development, but in terms of like the efficiency of the system, how much it costs to use the system, how fast the system can run, all those things will be worse for a system that's trying to add privacy to the underlying functionality of this. Now, again, like the magnitudes of this vary greatly. And the person who asked the question, they make a good point that there is also this question of protocol versus application level. There's a lot of problems that can be solved in application level and are more efficiently solved at the application level. So like protocol level stuff, we always have to be really, really judicious of being like, is this a problem that needs to be solved at the protocol level? Is this something where universally this particular thing has to be solved for everything happening on the network? So there are certain things that fall into that category. It's sort of like, like network fees, for example, or like even the royalty system is something we feel like, yeah, we need to have this universal ability of being able to have a developer be able to charge for all transactions for their component. So this belongs to the protocol level. And actually, as it turns out, it wasn't that inefficient to do. This was a very sort of, we'll have more details about it, but it sort of fits into our overall model. Privacy is really, really hard, though. So I would expect to me, like it's something that I think we need to learn more about the problem over the coming couple years of our roadmap. We need to understand like what are the real privacy problems that need to be solved and what part of the system do they need to be solved at. If we come to a point where we go like, yeah, this has to be a protocol level thing, or it simply doesn't work, then, these are things that we can look at. I wouldn't go so far to see like this is going to be built in as an afterthought. This isn't going to be something that, if you build in privacy features, it's going to require like pretty significant rethink of whatever part of the system it is that you're trying to privatize. And I do think there's honestly a whole lot you can do at the application level. I think there are edge of network services that can solve many of the practical problems and do it better. So I think we're going to learn how those things play out once Babylon goes live. We're going to learn more about the problems they've solved. We're going to learn more about what our ecosystem can solve with the tools that we've built. And then we figure out what layer of the system do we need to do more work to make sure that people have the rights and the protections that they need. So it's definitely like a long-term roadmap thing, but it's something that like trying to build it in now, I think is going to be it would definitely slow down our roadmap. It would definitely introduce friction in a way that we don't even know if it's valuable at this point. So that's my feeling.
There's so many aspects to this that like are like very much like conflicting in my soul. It's like I think that ultimately everyone has an absolute right to privacy, and that I think that is increasingly being enshrined in law, at least in the European Union, with things like GDPR regulations and the right to be forgotten and all this kind of stuff. Well,
I continue to be hopeful that in the U.S. we're going to realize that if you're a fan of the Second Amendment, you should be the fan of protections for privacy and for cryptography. Basically, like this is now the individual's ability to guarantee their own protections against oppressive governments or whatever it is cryptography and privacy. It's no longer a rifle.
No, yeah,
that's a great point.
And that was what the cypherpunk movement was founded on, was this concept of privacy as a right. And so, like, I think that there's a battle coming, but it's a long way out. It's like right now I can just hear like a little bit of distant thunder. I can't hear that this is something immediately on the horizon. And the other thing is that the big thing that everyone in crypto is really trying to get their hands around, if you are a manager of large amounts of funds, or a hedge fund, or a private equity fund, or anyone who's an investor but sophisticated in the space and has regulatory requirements, is how do I deal with AML, anti-money laundering? And the thing is that regulators are just getting their heads around the concept of chain analytics, and they're going, "Ooh, we quite like this. This is good. We're starting to feel like not all crypto is just drug dealers. Not everything on crypto is by default has to be considered suspicious," which is actually what the regulatory framework has been for most things until now. You're starting to see banks who are willing to open up bank accounts if you want to bank crypto. The reason that's happening is because of chain analytics. The reason that you're now able to start moving money more freely in and out of the crypto ecosystem is because of chain analytics. That's the key thing. And that's the thing that regulators are hanging their hats on and getting their understanding of, and being able to do risk-adjusted concepts of anti-money laundering. As soon as you bring in complete privacy, you break that. And that's why you're seeing a lot of exchanges delisting things like Monero and delisting things like Zcash and stuff like that, because it breaks the model that the regulators have kind of got the simple view. They've gone, oh, I can understand how you can take a risk-based approach to the crypto that's come into you and decide whether or not it's the results of money laundering. And like, that's more important in terms of getting it adopted. But the thing is that again, governments and individuals are going to continue to demand more privacy, and there's going to be a bunch of fights that happen down the line. And I think that privacy will come, and the tools are there. And like on Radix, one of the cool things that I love about Radix is that it's essentially a generalized UTXO based system, which also lends itself pretty cool way to some pretty cool privacy crypto as well. Like, it's not stuff that we're researching or planning to put in now, but the way that we built it actually has a bunch of really good answers to stuff of how would you do that if you wanted to. But like, honestly, that is not a battle that's worth having now, because it pushes you out of the mainstream, not into the mainstream. It pushes you out of the line of adoption rather than into the line of adoption. If we're serious about getting the $400 trillion global financial system on top of our platform, we have to be serious about what the order of fights you pick are. And privacy is a later order of fight, but it is one. This is why I'm saying it's a conflict in the soul. Like, it is a fundamental human right, and we do have to work out ways of doing that. But that has to happen as a result of conversations with regulators and governments and individuals about what is the right level of privacy. And it's gone the right way in the European Union with GDPR and data privacy and rights to be forgotten. It's going the right way in terms of governments who are thinking about human rights for their citizens. So I think it's going to continue to go that way. But
yeah, and I think one of the wonderful things is if we can get established decentralized open platforms that become widely adopted, now this is the platform where those rights can be claimed. If you see what I'm saying, like that's the fundamental thing. It's not as if we have to go back later and go like, oh, now everyone has decided like, look, this is the most important privacy feature, and most of the users of the network need this, and we know what problem to solve. Like, it's an open network at this point. Now it's like the users of that system will have the ability of making those changes. These things can be implemented. It's not as if we have to then go back at that point and ask for permission from a government. You're like, well, hey, we now do want to do this privacy feature. Will you allow this to be added to the network? No. It's our network. It's everyone's network. This is part of the point of these networks. So we got to get them adopted first. We got to get everyone on these platforms, make them useful, make them valuable to economies, get everyone onto them. And now we've got a world in which we can claim our own rights.
And like, I understand that some people will watch this and be like, wow, you guys are so naive. And like, I think that the honestly, like the most naive view is that you're going to battle the world to the point where the people who are genuinely afraid of going to prison and breaking the law and like losing their licenses for their core business are going to fight the same fight here. It's not that they're not. They're going to go, how can we do this? Oh, the regulator says, okay, this is the right thing. And that's why, lobbying the regulator is going to be important around privacy at some point, and then making them understand how they can still do that risk-based approach without having every single transaction on the ledger public. But then this goes into the questions like Matt was asking, what is private to whom, under what circumstances, and how is that managed? Again, those are really complicated technical problems. And if the regulator can't even be part of that conversation because they're still in the first rung of it, it's just not the right time.
And this happened before. This was the same story that happened during the rise of the internet. Of like, I remember in the late 90s, it was like you had a lot of the cypherpunk purists who were like, the internet must be used in this way so that, like, right from the beginning, like, all of these rights are 100% guaranteed, and there's no way in which we can intrude on these things. And the idealists lost, but in the long term, the cypherpunks won. Like, the internet is an open network where information can't be suppressed, where people that are subject to oppressive governments have ways of escaping that and have ways of having their voice be heard. Like, they won in the end, but they didn't win in the way that they thought they would win. They didn't win by by this very sort of front-loaded battle head on with like, no, you cannot intrude here. It's like, let the platform be adopted and it will naturally win because the natural parameters of the network are designed to be open and to enable these sorts of things.
I think we will move on to the last question, which is by Radix Maxi. The CMO has been in the job now for 3 to 4 months. It honestly feels like you've been in the job for years.
It feels like that. That's why my hair is more and more gray every week. Yeah.
Like it constantly like shocks me how slow time goes and simultaneously quickly. 3 to 4 months. That's mad. 3 to 4 months. What sort of progress have you seen in the marketing department since he started?
It's like my review.
It's like your
Yeah, what have you done for us lately, Jer? Justify your existence.
I'll leave and let you guys discuss. Would that be good?
And will the marketing change and accelerate as we get closer to Babylon? Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
I can take the second one.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys go to town on the first one?
Okay, so I'm gonna cop out and be like, well, he's written all of the things that happened in his marketing Wednesday Sharp 5 on our blog. If you go, it's a great review of the last quarter. Some of the key statistics around this is we've grown the number of wallets that have over 2,000 XRD in it by 25%. We have driven the number of Scripto clones up from 600 to over 2,000, meaning that over 2,000 developers have downloaded and tried our programming language, which is amazing. Like amazing. Just for those who don't hear me say it, 18,500 full-time Web3 developers in Web3 completely, and we've managed to get 2,000 in 6 months. That's incredible. Well done, Matthew. Well done, Russell. Well done, Adam. Everyone's been part of that, and grown our monthly site visits up from 50,000 to 150,000 monthly visits. I think there's been some really great headline. We've also significantly grown our Twitter following. We've significantly grown our Discord community membership. We've increased
37 meetups, if I can do a little self-promotion.
37 meetups
around the world.
Yeah. Radix ambassadors have gone from 2 to 49. Yep. What I find as being my favorite metric for just the feel, the texture of it, is going and sitting in the Discord channels, like the Scripto channel, the Scripto beginners channel, or sort of the class of 2022, all of that, and just reading the back scroll and seeing how serious and how leaned in these people are being about what we're building, and how incredible the excitement is and the engagement is, and yeah, it's I think there's been a sort of some really cool stuff that's done, and it's not just that's not all marketing. It's marketing plus team. I'm not saying that it's just Mr. CMO.
It's all marketing, and but it wouldn't be possible without amazing product, amazing tech, amazing strategy. I mean, all that shows up and makes the marketing job much easier, because we're like, look, we got a welcoming community. That's because our community moderators are, and the dev ecosystem people are spending time. Look, we have amazing tech. That's because we've built amazing tech. We actually have substantial value there. So it's really easy to go out and be like, hey guys, pay attention. And then they see it and they're like, okay, I looked under the hood. It's not vaporware, it's legit. So yeah, I mean, we get a little bit of the credit, but at the end of the day, we're the tip of the sphere that's only enabled by all the hard work that everyone's doing down in the trenches and beyond. And we appreciate that.
My favorite thing in the whole of Jeremy's onboarding experience was Jeremy just, every time we went through another aspect of Radix, Jeremy just started saying, man, I'm starting to feel sorry for the competition. I was like, yeah, man, it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. So yeah. Adam, what do you think?
Prior to Jeremy starting, people were doubting the gradients. As of now, people worship the gradients. Clearly, marketing's doing a good job.
I like that we have a great...
And everything you said, of course, as well.
I like that we have a great focus now on, we pick one thing to try to get good at, attracting developers was a recent focus, and we learn how to do that well. And it's not that, and now we'll continue to do that. And we pick a new focus, and now it's all about, we're going to be about, how can we get word of mouth recommendations and bring that in. We'll learn how to do that very well. I like this approach because it feels very much like this is a technical thing I can get behind, where you go, here's a problem to solve. How do we implement a solution for it? How do we test that we did it right? Now we know how to solve this problem. It goes to steady state. What's the next problem, right? this is a model I can relate to very well, and I've seen it work. So I'm pleased that we're following the same model in marketing.
Matt?
The question also asks about the marketing department specifically, and one of the things I really enjoy is internally, like watching the actual marketing department that Jeremy's been growing in there. It's like, I get focused on kind of the product side, but every once in a while, like kind of jump in there and I'm part of a meeting, and it's always like, it's like opening the door on a newsroom in like, a Cary Grant movie or something, where it's sort of like, people are running around and papers being, and people working and stuff and everything, and phones being passed around and all this kind of stuff. There's like this enormous amount of activity in there. It's a bunch of these really motivated people who are like, I've got a great idea. We should go do this thing. Let's try this. All right, let's see. How are we going to capture that? What do we do with that? All right, we learned something. Move on to the next thing. And then it all gets kind of stitched together into an overall strategy. So just like the level of activity and excitement and everything is like really gratifying to see. And Jeremy's done a great job building that team out.
I'm gonna record this
You're
clip
gonna-
for when the shitty days come, and I'm like, okay, it wasn't all bad.
I remember
Jerry,
the day.
Jerry like planted this question. This was like fishing.
Yeah.
He was just like,
Yeah, Radix Maxi, thanks, man. I owe you one. Exactly. We'll hook you up with some swag or something like that. You got it, man. Sorry, go ahead.
And just the second part of the question.
Yeah, no. As far as the marketing change and accelerate as we get closer to Babylon, I mean, it's definitely going to change because our story is going to get even stronger and our operational efficiency is getting better. One of the things that we're really working on, I mean, I think Russell, who is a marketer in technologist clothing, really nailed something that we're doing, which is really trying to figure out what the problem is and then figure out how to solve it effectively. So the problem we're really trying to figure out between now and arguably sort of AlphaNet Plus is, okay, how can we programmatically create the Radix revelation among the right types of people? Our mission, our purpose as a marketing team is to create and empower Radix evangelists, right? The more evangelists we have going out, sharing the word, explaining it, the more authenticity we have. Yes, there are other things that are involved in marketing, but at the end of the day, nothing's more powerful than word of mouth, which is why we're focusing on it in Q3. But we believe that it's possible to create a predictable journey for the right types of people to walk through a door, go through an education process, and arrive at the Radix revelation. It's going to be a little rough in the first going, but once we figure that process, that flow out, then it'll be like, I don't want to say a factory because that dehumanizes it, but basically a good, reliable, educational, enlightening experience for people. So I think the more we can do that, then you'll see an acceleration because we'll start seeing basically network effects off the growth of our evangelists. So you will see an acceleration. I think the only thing I'd say is it's not acceleration of the marketing, it's acceleration of the marketing outcomes. That's really, like, you don't want faster activity. Like, if it doesn't change the outcomes, who cares? Like, we can do stuff faster, but if we have crappy outcomes, who cares? So the question is, can we deliver the outcomes that we want more effectively, more cost effectively, more efficiently? That's certainly the hope. Certainly would like to be able to do that. And that's definitely, we've spent 3-4 months putting that infrastructure in place, putting the right team. I mean, we've built this team out by a fair number of people. We're at a good place right now in terms of the people we have. And I think, it'll take us probably a couple more weeks to really work on gelling all those pieces. But I think once we roll from there, we should see the acceleration and definitely change as our story gets tighter. Once we hit beta net, obviously our story is going to change significantly because of what we can really point to. Again, we're not going to go out and talk about things that don't exist. Matt's drilled this into my head and he's totally right. But once things exist, then we can be like, go look at all this stuff that we have. It's really there. You could go do this right now. And that December to March timeframe will be liberating for us. I'll probably just sit back and do nothing because beta net will just solve all our problems.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Build it and they'll come. That's
marketing,
obviously what
right?
happens.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I think we'll bring that to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you everyone who watched until the end. You get a cookie. If you want your cookie, you have to @ me in Telegram with Piers give me a cookie, and I know you've watched it until the end. Until next time, please keep the questions coming in.